Good evening. I am Joe Core, Superintendent, North County Central School District, and tonight is our Meet the Candidates Night and annual budget hearing for the 2021-2022 budget. At this point, I will turn it over to our moderator for the evening, Jody Orzechowski. Jody.
Thank you, Joe. So at the budget vote on May 18th, residents will elect 2 candidates to 5-year terms without compensation to the Board of Education. Seats are not at large, and candidates had to declare what seat they were running for at the time they picked up petitions. The open seat of current board member Marynardillo is uncontested. The open seat of W. Ronald Vondel has 3 candidates running. So each candidate will read their statements now. We're going to start with Marynardillo.
Thank you very much, and good evening, and welcome to my fellow board candidates and my colleagues on the school board, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marynardillo. I'm seeking a 4th term on the North Colony Board of Ed. I've lived in this community for close to 50 years, so basically my entire life, give or take a few years. I have a long history of service in the North Colony School District, which began with the Southgate PTA, then on to PTA Council, eventually leading me to the Board of Education, where I've had the privilege of serving for the past 15 and a half years. Those 15 plus years include my first 2 terms from 2004 to 2014. I was then asked to return in order to fill a board vacancy from 2015 to 16. And finally in 2016, I was reelected to the seat that I currently hold. I've served as vice president and president of the board and have chaired the Community Board Relations Committee and the Employee Relations Committee. For the past several years, along with Mr. Vondel, I've had the pleasure to serve as co-chair for the Budget Committee, and I also co-chair the Audit Committee. I've acted as board liaison for Shaker High School, Shaker Junior High School, and currently for Southgate Elementary School. I have always been grateful to be a part of this school district, but all the more this past year when teachers, administrators, and all our school professionals have gone to extraordinary lengths to deliver high quality education, carrying out their vital services to our students under very difficult circumstances. That garners my respect. I also feel very grateful to be involved with the decisions that affect North Colony's nearly 6,000 students, each with a diversity of gifts and backgrounds. This collaboration is what makes North Colony the exceptional school district it is. Students come from all races and religions, some from affluent families and others whose families are struggling to make ends meet. Of those attending, many speak English as their primary language, but many are just learning. Each individual comes to our schools every day with their own unique mix of ambitions and aspirations. Each has such potential for positive contribution, not only to this community, but to our world. I would like to continue service on this Board of Education to that end. This board's purpose, our goal, one that I'm happy and proud to say we are meeting, is to help all our students discover and reach those ambitions and aspirations. It will be my honor, my pledge to continue serving the North Colony School District and this community for the next 5 years with that objective at the forefront. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
I'd like Mary Alber to go next.
Good evening. My name is Mary Alber. I also would be running for Board of Education candidate. Many parents in the district know me from Girl Scouts, softball, bowling, school PTAs, or from the special education PTA. After serving our community in multiple PTA leadership positions, as a co-leader of Girl Scout Troop, and on the district budget committee, I'd like to continue to expand my service to our community. I feel a Board of Education seat is important. It requires perspective for decision making. Having experience as a lifelong student, I've achieved my master's degree, and I continually pursue coursework as an adult. I'm a working parent, so I have perspective as a parent. Having served as an educator in New York State, being a special education advocate, and being business-minded as an IT professional, I feel that I am a well-rounded candidate and that I can help ensure continuing excellence in our district for all of our students. I strive to listen to my fellow community members and put myself in the shoes of my neighbors when decision-making. I look forward to the opportunity to continue to serve North Colony, represent working parents, and advocate for equity of services to all children and families in our school community. I strive to be a voice that asks thoughtful questions while setting expectations and accountability among school leaders, and to continually seek communication and feedback from students, but also from school staff and from parents. My approach will be rooted in the goal to never lose sight of the children and the families that are the root of why we serve. And I am humbly asking for your vote at the district elections, May 18th. If you choose me as your candidate, I will listen to you. I will advocate for change where it can benefit all students, regardless of ability or need. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to run for Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Nicholas Komprosky.
Hello and good evening. My name is Nicholas Komprosky, and I'm honored to run as a candidate for the North Colony Board of Education. I am a North Colony graduate from my entire career, starting in kindergarten all the way up through graduation, when then I continued on to Siena College, earning my teaching certification in social studies with a degree in history. And then I went on to become a member of the St. Louis community, earning my master's in adolescent special education. And I'm currently enrolled at St. Rose in the SBL SDL, which is for the school building and school district leader, where I'm looking to earn certification as a school leader. And I'm currently almost done with that. I should be done in the fall. And as I finish that, I'm looking to continue on with my doctorate in educational leadership and policymaking at the University of Albany when I finish at St. Rose in the fall. So currently, I'm employed at the Troy City School District as a 7th grade social studies teacher. Prior to that, I was in the Albany School District and the Lansingburg City School District as a special education teacher, and I also taught night school as a special education teacher and a social studies teacher. My time in especially the Albany City School District, besides working with students of diverse needs, whether they were students with an IEP, students from a lower socioeconomic background, students who are of color, or students who may not have English as their first or primary language. I worked diligently with my school, especially with my special education students, rewriting and changing some of their outdated policies, where I had the opportunity to write some of the policies for the education and especially my special education students themselves. In the community, I am heavily involved with the fire department in the fire community. I've been a volunteer firefighter of the Maplewood Fire Department since I was 18. I'm currently a lieutenant there, where I've also written policies and designed some of our procedures that were also outdated. I'm an EMT, I'm the former Colony Firefighter of the Year, and I've been doing that. I started as a senior at Shaker High School. I've also done many different community outreach programs, working with the Northeast Regional Food Bank, volunteering time there. I've also worked with a lot of the Challenger sports leagues with my background in special education as a former special education teacher, working with some of the Challenger programs, especially in baseball and basketball. I'm also a volunteer assistant and have volunteered coached in basketball, baseball, and soccer through North Colony at former Shaker Junior High, now Shaker Middle School. I'm a board member of the A3C charity, which is rooted in Albany County. And I'm the current winner, the 2020 Gold Standard Award winner from Siena College. It stands for Graduate of the Last Decade, which is given to a graduate who has shown community outreach, professional career, and connection to the community of Siena College. A lot of my experiences in education, in policymaking, in working with some of the most diverse learners, diverse families, especially in my background in special education, has taught me how to be a human being and an advocate first. I worked with some of the, I would say people call them the at-risk learners, but I look at them as the more priority learners, as at-risk kind of gives them kind of a negative connotation. So I've worked with some of the most priority learners that the Albany City School District, the Troy City, and the Lansingburg School Districts had to offer. Again, rather they were students of color, students who had a lower social economic background, students with a disability. A lot of this has taught me how to advocate for these families, how to advocate for these students. It's led me to write and rewrite some of the policies that were not as equitable towards them in terms of discipline and having the access to some of the general education that they weren't necessarily getting. I believe my dedicated community service and my background makes me an ideal candidate to help lead the North Colony School District into leading them forward into a 21st century. I believe that I would make an ideal candidate, and I'm here for the community as I have shown dedicated service, and I continue to show dedicated service. And it would be an honor and a pleasure to serve the North Colony family more in this new capacity if elected.
Thank you, Nicholas. Lastly, I would like to ask Fox Reichenberg Stempel.
All right, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep, okay. So my name is Fox Reichenberg Stempel, and I'm very excited for this opportunity to run for the North Colony Board of Education. So now some of you may be thinking, isn't he a little young to be on the board? Well, let me tell you, even at my young age, I have the experience, background, and qualifications necessary to be a successful board member. I have been a member of the Boy Scouts of America for the past 9 years, and I am an Eagle Scout. Through my journey in the BSA, I've learned countless life lessons and skills such as teamwork, organization, planning, and so much more, which are very important to be a successful member of the board. I'm currently the Lodge Secretary of the Order of the Arrow, Scouting's National Honor Society, where I'm in charge of communications for nearly 1,000 scouts in the upstate New York area. I'm also serving as the Section Vice Chief, effectively the Vice President of the Order of the Arrow, covering scouts across Vermont, New York, and Pennsylvania. Also, as an Assistant Cub Master and Assistant Scout Master for Pack 1701 and Troop 1701 of Latham, I know what it takes to successfully operate a local organization and can use those skills to apply to the Board of Education. The New York State School Board Association states that the qualities of an effective board member are as follows: an effective communicator, a consensus builder, a community participant, a decision maker, an information processor, a leader, and a team player. I believe I possess all those qualities, and I'm excited to bring my prior experiences to the board. Also, I've been involved in the school community for many years. What really piqued my interest in the governance of the school is when I attended the forums leading up to the decisions from the capital project. I was very interested in how everything worked and how the school ran, and since then I've been very active within the district. I've served on the Shaker High School Student Government Student Representative Committee for the past 3 years, attending almost every Board of Education meeting, both in person before the pandemic and virtually. I've also been on the district senior event planning committee, ensuring that the senior class receives the proper recognition and celebration it deserves after 13 years of hard work. Now, one of my life purposes is to serve others and help others in any way that I can. This is precisely why I've decided to run for the board, as I want to help the school district in its mission of, and I quote, meeting the social, emotional, and academic needs of each and every child within a larger learning community dedicated to growing its capacity to serve and deliver the service of education. My belief is that the most important aspect of running a school district is to always keep the students in mind and making sure decisions are always made that will make things better for the students. After all, why would we all be here if it wasn't for the students? Also, as a board member, I would strive to ensure that teachers at all levels and subjects are consulted with when making any decisions that could impact learning in our classrooms, because it's crucial to get the opinions of our educators, as they're the ones on the ground doing the groundwork and ensuring our students' needs are met. Lastly, as a member of the Board of Education, I'd work with my fellow members and the district administration to ensure that North Colony's history of excellent education is continued for many years to come. My grandparents attended North Colony schools, my mother attended North Colony schools, my siblings and I attended and are attending North Colony schools, and I want to ensure future generations of North Colony residents receive the quality education we all know and love. Thank you for listening to me, and I encourage everyone watching to please consider voting for me on May 18th. Thank you.
Thank you, Fox. Thank you all for your statements tonight. Joe?
Thank you, Jody. So Jane, if we could bring up the presentation for tonight's budget, and we will overview the 2021-2022 budget. So this is our official budget hearing. And first of all, I'd like to inform our audience on the live stream that any budget questions can be emailed to communications@ncolony.org. You will see that email address on every slide. And if you have questions as you come along, you can send them and we will work to address these at the end. Tonight, I will also be assisted by Deputy Superintendent Kathleen Skeels and Assistant Superintendent for Business, Mr. Scott Hoot. So tonight, we're going to go through our mission statement, which really is the focal point, and it is the lens through which we budget. We'll look at the New York State aid picture. We'll look at federal funding because that is significant as we plan going forward. Ms. Skeels will discuss staffing, new programs and initiatives. We'll cover how we're getting our revenues this year, look at our expenditures, and as required by New York State education law, we'll do our budget in 3 component parts: program, administrative, and capital. We'll talk about expenditures attendant to those 3 component parts. We'll talk about the tax levy. That's the percentage increase in the tax rate. And then we'll talk about the tax rate, and that is the actual, it's the increase in the levy over last year, and the tax rate is the actual impact on individuals who own homes and businesses within the North Colony Central School District. We'll talk about how the property tax cap is calculated, and we'll look at what our tax cap is. We'll compare our tax rate to our neighbors in the Suburban Council. We'll look at what the impact of a contingent budget would be. And we will look at the voting that you will be partaking in on May 18th. Proposition 1, that is the single item on the ballot. That is the proposed expenditure budget. And then there is the Board of Education ballot where you will be, as you know, our candidates expressed in their statements. They are competing for various seats on the Board of Education. Mrs. Marynardillo is running unopposed, and we have Mr. Komprosky We also have Mr. Reichenberg Stempel, and we have Ms. Alber competing for the seat that is currently held by Mr. Vondel. And then we will have the voting details, hours and the like, location, absentee ballot information that will be presented. Again, you may email any budget questions to communications@ncolony.org. So let's go to the next slide, which is our mission statement here within the district. And so when we look at our mission statement here, we have two component parts. This is the lens through which we budget, and the first part is the most important part. And it is the statement that all students are provided the opportunity and necessary support to engage in relevant, challenging work which contributes to their academic and social growth and development. So I think the integral words in that part of the mission statement is that all for students. First of all, we mean all means all, and we constantly look at our data and we look at how are we doing with all of our students? Are we meeting the needs of each and every child? Are there gaps for some groups? And then we have to confront that data and narrow the gaps so that we truly realize the mission statement of all meets all. The other component part would be academic and social growth and development. So in our mission statement, we are committed to meeting the needs of the entire child, scholastically, academically, and socially and emotionally. We look to provide programming and support and staffing and resources to address those important components of our mission statement. The second part of it is based upon the realization that education is a people business, and that all staff, teachers, and administrators are part of a larger learning community working together to build collective capacity in order to provide a high quality, relevant, equitable education for all. So when we look at that, we also mean with all staff, all means all. So we know some facts here based upon research that a teacher first and a principal are very big determining factors in determining, in fact, the biggest factors in determining the overall quality of a child's education. Therefore, we must work together as a learning community to provide them resource support and also with support to develop their skills, provide them with the physical resources, the material resources, and the emotional support, as well as the knowledge support to provide the high quality, relevant, equitable education for all. When we look at the word all staff, all certainly means all with our staff. And so that also means our wonderful support staff, those individuals who drive our buses, who serve food, who support the offices, who keep our buildings safe and clean. All these individuals are so vital. The individuals who support the act of teaching, our teacher aides, our teacher assistants, all staff, we work together, we build our capacity, and the end result is we provide a higher quality, relevant, equitable education for each and every child. So when we budget, again, we look to our mission statement as a guide. So let's go to the next slide where we'll have our three pillars. And now I would like to have Ms. Skeel speak to the three pillars that guide our work.
Thanks, Mr. Kaur. So you can see words that Mr. Kaur was just using as he explained our mission statement: academic excellence, equity, and social emotional health. These are always our three pillars. What's different this year is the description of the pillars and what they mean as we think about coming back after this pandemic. So academic excellence in this particular year and in this particular budget means identifying and addressing continuity of learning needs. We know that students have been remote, students have been hybrid, students have been in person. So our academic excellence will only stay at the level it is if we can assess and understand where our students are, meet them where they are, and close any learning gaps so that we can move forward. Which relates to the next one, equity. Equitable education means everybody gets what they need. We've all heard that, but we're framing that differently this year. Notice the first word for equity is innovating. Innovating to promote excellence and avoid opportunity gaps. You're hearing a lot in the media right now about the learning loss, oh, this learning loss that has happened. Well, it's been a challenging year plus since the pandemic. That goes without saying. However, our students have also learned a lot of skills. And so what we want to say is we have to change the narrative. We can't start the year by saying, oh, everybody's behind. Everybody, oh my goodness, everybody missed all this work, because then that will hurt the next pillar of social emotional health. So instead, we're saying, how do we take our kids and how do we learn forward? What are the ways that we can present information, we can teach, we can offer different opportunities? And you'll see that in our summer program offerings. It's not going to be the typical summer school where you go to earn credit for a course that you failed. It's not that at all. It's connecting students back with schools with projects that they're interested in so that they can move forward. And that, of course, is deeply related to social emotional health, ensuring student and staff safety and well-being. This has been a long year plus. We have all experienced a collective grief in the ways that our lives have changed. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that in different ways it's been challenging. Some people it's been more challenging than others. And so we have to recognize at the very beginning that we can't talk about academic learning until people are feeling safe and well. And so when you look at where we have decided to spend our money this year in this budget that we're proposing to you, it is to ensure that those three pillars remain strong as we come back from this pandemic.
Thank you, Ms. Skeels. Let's go to the next slide. And if you could explain the relief, recovery, and rebuilding from the Economic Policy Institute.
Sure. So this was an article that was shared with our administrators and then with the board in an earlier budget hearing. And as you can see, it came out in September 2020, and it was a very broad look at what schools needed to successfully reopen and whatever version of reopening it was. And the first was relief, that schools needed urgent resources so that they could provide remote instruction. So think about that. For us, we were back there last March, making sure everybody had Wi-Fi access, that they had Chromebooks, that students could engage in online learning. Recovery, you're going to hear a lot about recovery tonight because that is what the government has provided, extra investments in schools, both from the federal recovery and from the New York State budget. So they were calling for after the immediate relief, think of this like triage of making sure kids had what they needed, then we needed extra investment. And both the federal stimulus dollars and the New York State budget have given that to us. It's the last bullet here that is about who we are in North Colony. It is now we rebuild. The pandemic has given us a chance to look at what is working and what maybe wasn't working as beautifully as we would have wanted prior. And so we're looking at how do we redesign the system to focus on nurturing the whole child. This is what I was just talking about with the three pillars. To make sure that, yes, cognitive and academic skills are important, but so are social emotional skills. There's nothing more important that we help to contribute to raise healthy children. The school is one of the greatest service providers to kids in the community, and that we have every resource possible that can enhance learning and development. So when we talk about a very different summer school, when we talk about a different, kinder, gentler reopening, when we talk about a different schedule where we might be able to work more with students in different ways, and you'll hear bits of that tonight. It's all about rebuilding based on the traditions we've always had, but meeting the expectation of this moment so that we can emerge truly stronger and move forward with the lessons that we have learned in this pandemic.
Thank you, Ms. Skeels. That's very helpful in providing us with further context for our budgeting here. So let's go to the next slide and we'll take a look at updated New York State aid. So the budget was late this year. New York State budget was somewhat late, about a week late, but when it came out, there was some good news for schools. So our foundation aid was enhanced. It was increased by $1.4 billion. It's interesting how this was sorted out. So districts received either a 2% or a 3% increase in foundation aid. However, one caveat which was favorable to North Colony was that if the district was funded at less than 60% of their promised foundation aid, the district was to be made whole at 60%. So North Colony over time had received 49.2 of the promised formula foundation aid, and we were one of the few school districts, probably slightly less than 10% of the districts in New York State, that was adjusted to 60% of full formula funding. So many school districts had been at or greater than 60% of full formula funding. We had been much less of what we were supposed to be at. So that represented an increase of $3.234 million in foundation aid from 2020-21 to this year. So the number was in 2021 was $12,125,223. Our foundation aid increased to $15,389,319. So that was a significant boost for the district in that adjustment to 60% of full formula funding. Another proposal that was in the governor's budget or the executive budget was to take expense-based aids and consolidate them into a lump of aids referred to as services aid. School districts consider this to not be desirable as the expense-based aids give a district some predictability for what they would be receiving from the state next year. Expense-based aids are based on how much a school district expends, for example, in transportation or to BOE services, and then based on the aid formula receives a certain percentage of that back the following year. So by not consolidating these aids, and I believe there are some 11 of these different categories, we now have, again, and we continue to have a greater understanding of what this aid revenue flow would be for the next year. Another aspect of the proposed governor's budget, the executive budget, which did not become enacted, was that the federal funding that was issued in the 3 stimulus acts that we've received so far was to be used as a supplement and not to supplant the state funding. So previously, in previous iterations in the governor's budget, federal funding supplanted state funding, which was concerning to many school districts because there was fear that once that federal aid went away, there would be a fiscal cliff and there would be questions about how that state funding would be maintained. Now that is federal funding is in addition to the state funding. It is a grant in aid from the federal government that has an application process and also has requirements and stipulations attached to it. So let's go to the next slide, please. And so this gives the review here of federal funding that is available through September 2024 for the North Colony Central School District. So CARES Act 1 was enacted in March of 2020. You can see the number there. That was $541,594. CARES Act 2 enacted in December 20, $5,667,835. And then the most recent iteration, the American Rescue Act, enacted in March 2021, producing $3,645,061 for North Colony. Now, the American Rescue Act has additional stipulations. So bullet one is that, first of all, 20% of the American Rescue Act allocation must be reserved to address learning loss through implementation of proven or evidence-based interventions. These could be summer learning, they could be summer enrichment, extended day, comprehensive after-school programs, or extended year programs. In addition, a district must ensure that the interventions, and these are attendant to the grant requirements, must respond to students' academic, social, and emotional needs and address the disproportionate impact of the coronavirus on economically disadvantaged students, children with disabilities, English language learners, racial and ethnic minorities, migrant students, students experiencing homelessness, and children and youth in foster care. So these are the important stipulations of the American Rescue Act. We are learning more and more about that. And most recently, last evening, more information came out and information regarding the application process. So this is still very new. School districts are learning about it, and school districts are making plans to apply for these grant funds and to address them and align them to the requirements of the grant that you see above. So let's go to the next slide. And so, we're going to spend a couple of slides here talking about the parameters for the federal funding. So the plans for the use of these federal funds must be developed with community input, and the plans must be posted by this July. And basically, the planning process must be given careful thought and consideration to the fact that anything expense to the grant is temporary, focused on relief and recovery, or in fact, there's an articulated plan for sustainability as to how the district would cover the costs once the federal aid is no longer available. So I think that is good that those stipulations are in there, because that provides a hedge, really, or I would say a cautionary tale to districts to avoid using this money to become reliant on it and then have no corresponding revenue source once the federal aid is gone. And so we are awaiting further information. We're just receiving it now immediately within the last 24 hours. And we're receiving this information, and that will guide us in the application process. So let's go to the next slide, and we have some more detailed information here on allowable expenses. So as you can see here, activities to address unique needs of certain students in our population: low-income students, children with disabilities, English language learners, racial and ethnic minorities, migrant students, students who experience homelessness, children and youth in foster care, and they can include how outreach and service delivery will meet the needs of the population addressed in that bullet point. It also can go to the purchase of material supplies to sanitize and clean the facilities, to purchasing educational technology. Ms. Skills mentioned social emotional support. It can be used to provide mental health services and supports through evidence-based full-service community schools. School facility repairs and improvement to enable school operations to reduce the risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental hazards. So that would include ventilation, for example, improvements to heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, all those elements as well. Also, other activities necessary to maintain operation of and continuity of service and to continue employ existing staff. So again, The focus there is how do you maintain your program? Many school districts throughout the state and throughout the country were experiencing the impacts of the pandemic through unemployment, through the loss of revenue, and they were forced to cut staffing and cut programs. This allows for the programs to be sustained. So let's go to the next slide. Could we go to the next slide, please? And so with the next slide here, we have a very important component, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Skeels, and Ms. Skeels will be talking about staffing changes and additions that we will be making here to improve the overall quality of our program and our program service delivery, as well as address the needs of the new middle school and expanding enrollment. Ms. Skeels.
Thank you. So obviously education is a people business, and a large part of our budget every year is costs associated with staffing. So we spend time each year talking to the board about new staffing positions we will need. So this year we're proposing 2 brand new administrative positions. One is the Director of Social Emotional Learning with a focus on equity. You can hear certain words in there: social, emotional, learning, equity. Those are 2 of our 3 main pillars. So this person would be responsible for supervising all of our district social workers, our district counselors at the elementary level, junior high level, high school level, and coordinating our social emotional learning curriculum, because we want to make sure we're always best when we're proactive. And as we have said right now, there are a lot of student and family needs. So we don't want to just have a crisis response team, which we have an excellent crisis response team. We want to build in proactive models for all students. So this person would take charge of those efforts, as well as professional development surrounding social emotional learning, and help with our efforts toward equity. And we've completed an equity audit. We know where our gaps are, and help move us in a direction to continue to get better at achieving that equitable education for all that is foundational to our mission statement. Next year, our middle school will open as a 6, 7, 8 building. We have had increased enrollment. If you've been following over the years, you know our district is expanding rapidly. We project that the middle school will open next year at over 1,400 students. It is currently, well, not currently, but when we last existed as a 7 and 8 building, it was approximately 800 students. And so we are asking for a middle school dean to help provide the kind of safety and support necessary with the number of students who will now be in that building. Related to enrollment as well as our middle school, we are asking for 1.5 in the field of English as a new language. We have, when you have an increase in enrollment, we also have an increase in students who are learning English, and we need to increase that staffing. We also have a 1.0 world language position that we'll be adding at the new middle school, so that we can have 6th grade start their world language progression, and they don't wait till 7th grade, they start in 6th, and then they're ready to choose their language in 7th and 8th grade for their future study. A 1.0 music, so that we can provide the full range. We are consistently a best community for music, and we are proud of that, and we want to continue. We have many students who are interested in our music program, and that is always growing. Relatedly, we have a very fine art program, and we need a 0.6 art teacher. And this is because 6th grade is now moving. We have additional sections, and we can't simply plunk a teacher from the elementary level because they're still busy teaching K-5 and all of those sections. We are adding a 1.0 CTE. We can start career and technical education as soon as 6th grade. We've never been able to do that in the elementary schools because we don't have the facilities. This was one of the exciting things about opening a middle school, that we could offer more opportunities for students at a younger age. So that will help with that. And we have 0.6 physical education as a new program. It is part of our adaptive physical education program, so that we can best meet the needs of all of our learners who might need a slightly different physical education program. Jane, the next slide, thank you. So as we get to 1,400 plus students in 3 grade levels, we currently are fortunate to have 1 librarian in the middle school. We would like to return to what the junior high had previously, which was 2 full-time librarians. We know our library media specialists are integral to the world in which we live. Helping students understand media literacy is probably one of the most important 21st century schools, as they are getting inundated with information. So we are adding a 1.0 librarian to the budget. We also need to add another elementary teacher. You'll remember that Bout Hills is our elementary school that is going to be a 4 deep elementary school across all grades. That will be 4th grade in the upcoming school year, and then 1 more year of 5th grade, and then it will completely be a 4 deep and our biggest elementary building. As we've talked about the mental health needs, the family needs, the student needs, we would like to add a social worker. Our coordination with our community resources is incredibly important. Our number of families in need of support, the number of families who need access to resources. We currently are fortunate to have 3 district-wide social workers, so we would like to add a 4th social worker to better assist students and families. We would like to add 2.0 elementary teacher reserve. What that means is our kindergarten enrollment is just on the brink of potentially needing another section, and our 6th grade enrollment is not quite as close as kindergarten, but we don't know the bump that we might get when we start now 6th grade in a middle school. Because we always used to get a bump in the past when kids started in 7th grade, and we got another bump in 9th grade when students would come from other districts. So we want to have those in the budget. We will only use those if the enrollment dictates. So we have the money set aside. We may or may not need them, but in this way, we have it budgeted and we're clear on the need. And finally, we need a 1.0 groundskeeper. We have added new fields. We obviously have such a footprint in the district, and Mr. Kraft has requested a additional groundskeeper to keep everything clean, safe, and ready to use for our students and our families.
So thank you.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say that is a total of 13.7 full-time equivalents. Salary and benefit projection for that is about $1,359,000, not about, I guess it is, and $673. And again, our middle school is opening, and we are fortunate that this is happening at a time when our foundation aid is increasing significantly as we move forward.
And Ms. Skeel, so Jane, if we could go to the next slide on new programs and initiatives, please.
Certainly. So we already talked about the 1.5 for E&L staffing. 0.2 of that will be devoted at the middle school to something called a Bridges program. This is specifically for students who are learning English as a new language, who are coming in as older students, middle school age, but are obviously needing reading materials and other materials that are at an easier reading level. Part of the problem with that is no student who's 13 or 14 wants to read a picture book that looks like it is for 7-year-olds or 6-year-olds. They want to read things that are interesting to them. So this program allows us to build curriculum and get resources that are age appropriate for emerging teenagers, but also are appropriate for the skill proficiency that these students have. And so we feel like that is very mission aligned. And then we talked about the innovation, right? We talked about innovating for academic equity. We talked about this idea of how do we think about our work differently. We're very excited, and this was part of our middle school capital project all along, that we will be able to open 5 innovation spaces at the middle school next year. There will be a health and wellness center. There will be a maker space. There will be a robotics and coding space. There will be a humanities center, and there will be a videography and podcasting center. So these will be spaces where all children in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade will be able to use these spaces during the school day. They will have a full-time teacher in those spaces so that students can learn to express their learning in different ways. It will be in coordination with classroom teachers and classroom projects. But the whole goal, again, of the middle school was to say, we want to help you find the place where you feel successful, you feel happy. And our goal with the innovation spaces is to show students that something they think they do just for fun can actually become a career. If you've got middle school or older kids at home, you know how many videos they make. They can make a video in about 10 seconds. There are so many careers that they can go into around that they are not even thinking of. Not everybody's going to be a YouTube influencer. I know they think they could become that. Maybe they will. But there are a million other jobs related to this. So we want students to find what it is that gives them purpose and helps them feel proud of the work that they do. Because our goal should never be that they only cross the stage at graduation. It should be that by the time they leave us, they've crossed the stage, they found somewhere where they feel like they can make a difference, they enjoy what they're doing, and they can contribute in a meaningful way to our society. And we think starting those in the middle school, and even better news, we will have one of these open in each of our elementary buildings as well. It will be attached to our library. In primary grades, this will be for purposeful play, not screen time for the little ones. Really playing with blocks, problem solving, working with other kids, all those social skills that they may have missed during this time of the pandemic. So we're going to build that in intentionally. And then as they get up into 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, more curriculum projects, collaboration with the librarian and the classroom teachers, collaboration with the art teacher and the classroom teachers, to show students the connection between disciplines and show them the different ways that they can express their own learning. And these are very exciting spaces. And we believe this adds to helping with social emotional learning because it's out of the classroom. It's working with your classmates. It's the energy that comes with working with other kids. We believe it adds to our equity pillar because it's scheduled within the school day. It's not just the kids who can do it at home or the kids who can stay after school or the kids who can do it on a weekend. It's for all students. And it contributes to academic success because it's the kind of problem solving and unique application of learned material that only helps them to grow as learners.
Thank you, Ms. Skeel. So really, those are the new staffing and the new programs and initiatives that are embedded in this budget. So let's go to the next slide, which would be the 2021 proposed revenue budget. Thank you very much, Jane. And so we'll take a look at this chart here. So you can see the chart looks at the revenue from 2021 on the left side. And then in the next column, 21, 22, you see the comparison side by side. In the 3rd column, you have the dollar change, and in the 4th column, you have the percentage change. So the bulk of revenue that school districts get in New York State comes from property taxes. So if you take a look at that in 2021, we had 88.2 million to be raised approximately from property taxes. This year, we're proposing 89.438 million to be raised from property taxes. That's a change of slightly over 1.2 million, and the increase in taxes is 1.39%. Our pilots are payments in lieu of taxes. That's the acronym that is used. They are arrangements made by regional planning authorities to attract businesses into an area with a payment plan to the municipality in lieu of taxes. And so this year that number is 212,000, slightly over that. That's a decrease of 281,000 approximately, and that's down 56.97%. So then the next big supplement to a school budget in New York State is state aid. And Primarily, one of the most important aids, or the most important aid in a state budget, is foundation aid. So you can see that in 2021, we were budgeted for $9.7 million of revenue in foundation aid. Now, if you go back to the previous slide, you may remember that there was a number of 12.1 million. That was the promised foundation aid for 2021. When we actually calculated it, at that time, the state was threatening a 20% reduction in foundation aid. That never materialized, but this is what was budgeted for revenue back in 2021. So it does seem bigger than the number I gave you previously. However, okay, this year that number has bumped up to almost 15.4 million, an increase of $5.66 million, or an increase of 58.24%. And that's using the $9.7 million number. Building aid has increased 2.18 million up to 5.78 million, an increase of 60.59%. Our annexation aid occurred back in 2008 when we annexed the Maplewood Commons School District. This is the last year of that aid. It has been in a steady decline as per the requirements of that particular aid flow. And so this is the last year. We received $285,659. That is a reduction of about half of the previous year's amount. Transportation aid is at 3.37 million, down about $35,000. BOCE's aid is down about $86,000. It represents $1.4 million. High cost aid, this is for students with disabilities who are in placements that are highly complex, and that aid flow has increased by $45,000. It's about $880,000. Supplies, materials aid, textbook aid, software aid, that has decreased by about $8,000. It's $591,000, and all other aids are collapsed together for $270,000. That's about a decrease of about $98,000. So the proposed state aid budget is up $27,971,723. It's at almost $28 million. That's an increase of $7.378 million, or an increase of 35.83%, budget to budget, that is. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Now, going in, these are other forms of revenue that we receive, that we use. So please remember that in the state of New York, a school district is required to present a balanced budget. So this year for tuition and special education, we are budgeting a revenue supply of 1.845 million. That's down about 4%. Interest earnings are way down, as you probably well know, from your checking account, from your savings. So that's down by 45,000, or a decrease of 90%. Other revenue is down by about $91,000, $92,000. That's at 1.3 million, $1.374 million. We also can use some of our designated reserves and our undesignated reserves as a revenue source. So our designated fund balance has dropped off by 1.2 million. That's a good thing. That's a 25% reduction. We are increasing our budgeting for the Teachers Retirement System reserve. That was a reserve that was established just a couple of years ago. So that's up by $90,000. Our employees' retirement system reserve remains constant at $200,000, as does the compensated absence reserve and the unemployment reserve. So we are budgeting $4.13 million in reserves. That's $1.11 million less than last year, a reduction of $21.18 million. So our total revenue budget is $124,977,067. That's up almost $7 million, or 5.93%. So as I said before, revenues must balance expenditures, so that will also represent our expenditure budget. So let's go to the next slide. And so when we look at this, we're going to break this into component parts here. So the biggest component of a school expenditure budget, we've said that it is a people business, okay, would be staff, salary, and fringe benefits. So staff salary this year is $70,367,652. That's a dollar change of $3.16 million. That's 4.7%. That represents negotiated contractual raises plus the new staff that we added in there, the $1.37 million of staffing that Ms. Skeels referenced in that slide. So that's what that number represents, as does the fringe benefit number. So fringe benefits represent $31,875,553. That's an increase of $2,034,139. That's up 6.82%. So the total salary and fringe benefits for this budget is $102,243,205. That's a dollar change of about $5.2 million, or 5.35%. For textbooks and library books, we are expending about $15,000 more. That's $506,606. That's up 3.04%. Let's go to the next slide on expenditures, please. And so now we're going to look at the contractual services. So our utilities are down slightly. They represent $1.47 million. Our BOE services are up by $1.2 million. Please remember that the next year we get a percentage of that back in state aid. So that's an important concept to grasp. Our special education department spending has decreased by $57,000. It's $1,045,000. Operations and maintenance have decreased by $201,000. That's $488,000. Diesel gasoline is holding constant at $270,000. Insurance is up by about $2,000, $382,000 and a bit. Refunds of property taxes, we've budgeted $100,000 for that. That's when businesses and homeowners appeal the tax rate, and if they win that appeal, then they get the refund. So we budget for that. Workers' compensation, $530,000. That is constant. Health services to other districts up slightly at $2,000. That's $255,000. And charter school tuition has decreased slightly by $5,000. That's $385,000. So we look at those contracted services and all other departments. That's down $125,381. And so the amount of spending there is about $2.2 million. So if we look at our total contracted services, it is at $11.485 million. It's up $829,168, or 7.78%. Let's go to the next slide. And so in concluding here with expenditures, our debt service is up $962,000, about 19% to $6.142 million. Our interfund transfers are up $220,000. Our equipment is up, or is really maintaining at $1.71 million. And supplies have decreased slightly to $224,026. So when we look at our total expenditures, it equals our revenues. It's $124,977,067. It's up by the same amount of the revenues. It's at about 7 million, or $6,997,566, or 5.93%. So another way of looking at how we budget here, and so we can look at this, is the three-part format. So we are required to present it in a three-part format. So we look at the programs of program component, and that's instruction, special education and pupil support services, guidance, library and IT, health services, sports and co-curricular, summer school programs, interfund transfers, transportation, employee benefits. So if you take a look at those areas there, and you can see the comparison between the 2 years, going down to the bottom line there, we have an increase of about $5.4 million from a slightly over 86 million the previous year to this year, looking at program at $91,636,005. So that makes up roughly 3/4 of our budget. And that's where we want it to go. We want it to go to programs that impact students. And we're pleased to note that it's up slightly from last year to this year in terms of the percentage overall in our budget. Let's go to the next slide for the next component. And this is the administrative component. So Board of Education expenses, Board of Education, please be mindful of the fact that Board of Education members are volunteers. They are not compensated. So that is not in reference to Board of Education salaries. It's other expenses, including clerical, supplies, support, other expenses associated with the Board of Education. Central administration, as you can see, that number is down slightly. IT is up, and that's up significantly, and you can only imagine why it would be up by over $200,000, given the needs that we had this previous year and the needs that we need to continue to sustain. Insurance is up slightly. School administration is up by about over $300,000. You can see that $6,053,451, and employee benefits are also up by about $250,000. So if we look at that administrative component there, then that administrative component has increased to $17,339,567. As a percentage of the budget, it's dropped slightly from 13.93% to 13.87%. So let's go to the third component. And the third component is the capital component. So the debt service, it's what we are currently paying on our building project. So as we have approached final completion here, the debt that we are assuming has gone up. So you can see that number reflected there in that 6.142 million, increasing from 5.18 million. Property services up to 147,000. Our bus purchases are down this year by about 300,000, and operations and maintenance is down slightly. And the employee benefits attendant to that capital component are also up. So if we look at that, the capital component represents $16,001,495, and it has dropped as a component percentage from 13.2% to 12.8%. So let's go to the next slide. So I think a couple of important factors for us to look at here. So tax levy versus tax rate. So that is the tax levy does not equal the tax rate. So the levy is increasing. That is the large sum of money, almost $90 million that we are raising in taxes. And so the levy this year will increase our revenue in that particular category by 1.39%. But the estimated tax rate increase is less than 0.5%. And that's a very conservative increase because today we talked with the town tax assessor, and if we look at, based on what we found out today, that rate increase would really be about 0.25%, 0.25%. So what happens here is, right now for our publication purposes, we are estimating assessment growth to be about 0.89%. And so that's the offset to that 1.39%. So when we look at what the rate increase would be, and this is a conservative rate, and it is possible, very possible, that it could be less than that, not 0.5%, but 0.25%. So that would be an estimated tax bill increase of $24 for the year on a median taxable assessed home. That's at $172,000, and that would be a home that has a $300,000 market value, since the town is not at full assessment. So let's go to the next slide, and I will turn it over to Mr. Scott Hood, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, who will explain the calculations that go into the property tax cap.
Thank you, Mr. Corr. So I'll draw your attention to the very top line. We'll run through the calculation and explain what the bottom line means in its relation to the revenue budget and tax cap. So as always, we begin with the current year tax levy amount, which is $88.2 million. Then a growth factor is applied to that. Not all districts have growth factors, but North Colony does have a growth factor. So that 1.0159 is applied to the tax levy to create a new base of $89.6 million. We then make adjustments to that based on pilots, the payment in lieu of taxes that Mr. Corr referenced earlier, and the capital exclusion. So the pilots, again, based on our previous slide regarding our revenue budget, the current year we have $493,000 of pilot payments. Next year we are projecting $212,000 of pilot payments. And you can see how those adjustments are made in the formula at the top of the calculation and in the bottom of the calculation. The other factor, the larger factor, is the capital exclusion. And this relates to debt service, our principal and interest payments on outstanding debt and debt we may take on in the coming year for the new capital project. School bus purchases, as we make bus purchases with cash, if you will. We budget for those and we pay those in full. Those are a factor in the capital exclusion. And the aid associated with those payments. So building aid is a deduct from those expenses, both for building projects and for school bus purchases. So when you net out those numbers, you come up with a $2.1 million reduction in the top of the formula for the current year and a $644,000 add in the bottom of the calculation for the 21-22 year. Therefore, we come down to a tax levy limit of $89.4 million or 1.39%. Now, what is meant by a tax levy limit? The limit relates to the voting. So if a school district stays within its tax levy limit in building its revenue budget and its tax levy, then it's a 50% plus one requirement for budget passage. Sometimes you will hear districts are exceeding the cap. We are not. However, if you were to exceed that, then you get into a supermajority vote situation. But again, the 1.39% is the projected increase in the tax levy, and we are staying within our tax levy limit for the 21-22 budget year.
Thank you, Mr. Hoot. Let's go to the next slide, please. So when we take a look at how does the full value tax rate comparison for North County look in comparison to our neighbors in the suburban council. And if you can look at the schools there, North County is next to the bottom, next lowest to Saratoga Springs. So in North County, a taxpayer will pay $16.06 per thousand of assessed value. So our rate is 11 out of the 12 schools within the suburban council. We're fortunate to be able to keep it at that very affordable rate. Let's move to the next slide. So a contingency budget, we will explain what that means. So under New York State law, a district adopts a contingency budget when the budget has been defeated once. They can do it, but they must do it after a budget has been defeated twice. So you can put up a new budget. If it's defeated again, then you must automatically go to contingency. And that means you return to the previous tax levy, which would have, in effect, be a 0% cap. We would then have a budget shortfall of $1.7 million, and we would have to then reduce programs and staffing, use more fund balance, or a combination of both to balance our budget. And also, if we were on a contingent budget, we would be restricted on our equipment purchases, our capital expenditures, and the use of facilities by outside organizations. So that happens if the budget is defeated once. We could go right to contingency, but if we put the budget up again and it's defeated, it's automatic that it goes to contingent budget. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is the summary slide here in terms of what we feel we've accomplished in this year's budget. So we feel that we've done not only maintenance, but enhancement of programs and services in alignment with our mission and with our three pillars that Ms. Skeels explained. And that would be academic excellence, social, emotional well-being, and equity. We've put in staffing, we've put in resource, we've put in guidance and direction that we believe will address those three pillars. We have funding in place to facilitate a full return to in-person schooling and post-pandemic recovery. So we're budgeting this with the assumption that we are going to get the green light to return to full capacity for in-person schooling. We are prepared to do that, and we are prepared to help our students recover academically, and socially, emotionally from the pandemic. It also, when we take a look at our district, is opening a new middle school this year. It was scheduled to be opened last year, with the sixth graders now moving to that middle school. This year, with the reconfiguring we needed to do because of social distancing, our fourth, fifth, and sixth graders attended school not in their neighborhood elementary school, but at Shaker Middle School. So this budget provides the staffing, provides the resources. We have enrollment growth, so it helps to address that. But we have expanded operations as a result of the work that we've done on Shaker Middle School, on our outside facilities, our fields, and really on all our schools. And also looks at all the programs that are affiliated with the opening of the middle school and provides funding, support, and resources for that. The fourth bullet, it also creates a plan for the staffing and operation of the innovation spaces at the new Shaker Middle School. That would be budget neutral, but that would ensure the hands-on, engaging 21st century learning experiences for all students, thus focusing on equity for each and every student, that such experiences are not the perks of a few, but really are going to be experienced by each and every child within the district. This is a fiscally sustainable budget. We've reduced the use of our fund balance by about 25%, and we are going to be engaged in prudent management of federal grant funding. So when we look at the return components of that, and we look at the recovery components of that, we can manage that through the grant funding, because the implication there is that that is temporary. That is to help us come back from the pandemic. Sustainable activities that we seek to have as a permanent part of our budget, are contained in the budget that we presented here tonight. So they will be funded by the general fund. And any plans that we have to use grant funding for positions or resources that we're looking to be permanent or to sustain, we will come up with a plan to transition that per the requirements of the federal grant. And this budget also minimizes the tax impact by achieving a tax rate at or near 0.5%. So the average taxpayer would be looking at an increase of 0.5%. And we think it actually could be less than that. Again, if we went on today's projected today's projected assessment growth, it would be half of that. It would be about 0.25%. So the past 2 years, for all intents and purposes, we've kept our tax rate impact to be about flat on our voters. And we're also looking at, the assessment per thousand that a North County resident has. And, we are proud of the fact that we are, that's one area where it's not good to be number one. And we are proud of the fact that we are 11 out of 12 of our suburban council neighbors in that particular category. So let's go to the next slide, please. So what will you be voting on Tuesday, May 18? So you'll be voting on Proposition 1, which will be the annual budget. And that will be stated as follows: shall the proposed budget of expenditures of the North County Central School District for the 2021-2022 school year in the amount of $124,977,067, and for the purposes shown in the statement of estimated expenditures adopted by the Board of Education, be approved, and the amount thereof be raised by a levy of tax upon the taxable property of the school district, after first deducting the monies available from state aid and other sources. So you are voting on a spending plan, and minus aid from the state and other sources, you're voting on what the tax levy will be. Let's go to the next slide. You'll also be voting for seats on the Board of Education. We have 2 seats available. Board members in North County are members of a 9-person board, and the length of the term is 5 years. So Ms. Marynardillo currently occupies her seat. She is running uncontested. She is running for her seat without opposition, except for a write-in should someone choose to do that. The Board of Education seat for the seat of Mr. W. Ronald Vondell. And I'd like to take this moment to congratulate Ron Vondell on his outstanding 10 years plus, I believe it's 11 years of service to the North County Central School District. Ron, I think And for all our board members tonight and for all our board candidates, board service is, in my opinion, incredible, high quality, demanding public service to our community. Our board members put in lots of hours, uncompensated hours, in the service of the families and children of North Colony. And so to Ron, many thanks for your efforts as a board member. To all our board members, many thanks for your service. And to all our candidates, many thanks for being willing to step forward and serve your community in this very noble capacity. So for the seat of Ronald Vondel, you would vote for one of the individuals. They all spoke here this evening, and it would be for one 5-year term. The individuals are Mary Alber, Nicholas Komprosky, Fox Reichenberg Stemple, and a write-in should someone choose to do a write-in. Next slide, please. So this is information about voting, and it is our last slide. So the date of the vote is Tuesday, May 18, 2021. The location is in the Goodrich Building. It's a single location. It's the district office at 91 Fiddler's Lane. We have 15 hours of voting time from 6 a.m., very early if you want to go before work, till 9 p.m. in the evening. Absentee ballots are available, so qualified voters who will be out of town or unable to vote in person due to illness, disability, duties related to the primary care of ill or disabled individuals being admitted to and a patient in the hospital, or the risk of COVID-19 transmission can vote by absentee ballot. Absentee applications must be received by the district clerk by May 11th if the ballot is to be mailed by the voter, or by May 17th if delivered personally to the voter. And if you wish to request an absentee ballot, you can contact Ms. Jane Dawson, our district clerk. The number is 518-785-8591. The extension is 3126, or the email is districtclerk, one word, @ncolony.org. To vote, you must be 18 or older on the day of the vote, 18 by May 18, 21, a U.S. citizen and a district resident for 30 days prior to the vote, and have a valid ID. So all voters coming to the district will be required to comply with the provision of any executive orders of the governor of the state of New York and the rules of the Albany County Health Department in effect on the day of the vote with respect to the use of PPE, personal protective equipment, and adherence to social distancing requirements. So again, if you have a question, email it to communication@ncolony.org. We will see if we have any questions here tonight, and certainly if you've been viewing this presentation, or you may be viewing it, we will have it taped and we will have it available to our voting public. If you look at that, you can certainly email those questions to communications@ncolony.org. And so without further ado, I think we can leave the slideshow. And I will now go to Jody to see if we have some questions in the communications email.
I have not received any.
Okay. Well, I want to thank our Board of Education members for their service. I want to thank all our board candidates for their willingness to come forward and serve their community. Again, noble service. Board of Education service, being in an education family, I think it is extremely noble service. So thank you for your willingness. For all my colleagues, all my administrative colleagues, my teaching colleagues, all my instructional support colleagues in the district, many thanks for your wonderful work in helping us put together this budget and for all the good work you do on behalf of the students of families and families of North County on a daily basis. Jody, many thanks for your good service here tonight as our moderator. And I think if in fact we do not have any questions, I think that concludes our evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So without further ado, I wish everyone a good evening, an enjoyable evening, and please don't forget to come and vote on Tuesday, May 18th at 91 Fiddler's Lane. Polls open at 6 and close at 9 p.m. And you can also pick up an absentee ballot here if you choose to vote in that manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good
Good night.
evening.
Good night, everyone.
Everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Night.